Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining our second part in the webinar series of this Insider's Guide to Agile at Scale. This part is evaluating enterprise agile frameworks. If you were able to join our first part, it was all about getting executive buy-in. In this part, we're really going to dig deep into the different enterprise agile frameworks and how exactly to select one and research them. So my name is Aman Bala, and I'm a VP of Product here at Blueprint Software Systems. Also joining me is Chris Castle, who's also Director in Product Management here at Blueprint.
Hi, everyone.
We're excited to present to you today. We're just going to jump right into it. As if you joined our previous webinar, we're going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes going through content, and then we'll leave about the last few minutes for questions and answers period. And so, yeah, it's the same rules. So jumping right back into it, so we're going to look at the most popular Agile frameworks and those used amongst enterprise customers, and what we're seeing from both the industry side as well as what also analysts are also seeing. So Chris, maybe you can jump off and talk to some of the most popular frameworks here.
Yeah, so by far the most popular, and there is even some evidence to suggest that the Scaled Agile framework is even more popular than noted here on the 2018 State of Agile report. It's really become the dominant player in the space, ahead of Scrum of Scrums, and other ones like Disciplined Agile or Large Scale Scrum. One of the things to consider is why go with a framework instead of just trying to create everything for yourselves. I think for me, one of the most obvious benefits is it provides a structure for you to expand Agile beyond the single team level. You get the benefit of working with practices that have been proven to be successful. You don't have to invent everything yourself. There are lots of published resources you can lean on and look to for guidance. Anything you've seen, Aman?
Yeah, I think also using the most popular Agile frameworks is kind of like a support system underneath you. Often, if you're trying to transition to Agile, you don't have that framework in mind. The task to transitioning to enterprise to Agile can seem really daunting and almost impossible. So the framework really provides you with that support system, whether it's like Chris mentioned, assets, as well as a high-level framework to follow, but also in some cases for the most popular frameworks, there's third-party services providers that can help you come into your organization, map out your processes and how you can transition and really hold your hand in that kind of aspect as well.
So let's go into a few of the more popular ones in a little more detail. And it's important to keep in mind that they all have a lot of the same underpinnings. They all make use of the same Agile principles from the Agile Manifesto, and they all really think about how they can apply lean thinking to enterprise Agile. For example, every framework you'll come across all recommend using team-level Scrum, making use of highly cross-functional teams that have a variety of different resources on them, and working off a prioritized backlog. And they're all really trying to solve some of the same problems, helping organizations move from a traditional stage-gated waterfall methodology to one that enables them to deliver higher quality products more quickly and are more closely aligned with the customer needs. I think the differences really center around how the application of these principles is laid out. And let's talk a little bit about some of the perspective of each framework. So I'll talk about LESS. So LESS was developed by Craig Larman and Bas Fode in around 2005. It's outlined in a couple of books written by both people. And their website also has a ton of freely available information that you can read and get a handle on what the framework does. The authors claim that It's the result of running thousands of experiments, and this experimentation methodology is baked right into their framework. It really, in my view, it really takes what works really well at a small product company where you're dealing with maybe 20 developers, and trying to expand that across scale to try and get that same kind of energy, that high level of communication, that high level of collaboration. I think of all the frameworks, it's probably the lightest and least prescriptive. It has a very short set of rules and a series of guides, which are more like recommended practices and principles. The very nature of the framework makes it very flexible, so it can be easily adapted to many different contexts, and it's pretty quick to implement because it's so lightweight. Although in my personal experience, it's really more suited to companies working on a single product, even if it's a large organization working on a single product, and not really suitable for large enterprises building large complex systems of systems. I would say it tends to max out once you get to about 8 or 10 Scrum teams and its effectiveness. I also think, another downside is this is going to be really hard, or harder to sell to your executives if you're looking to spearhead an agile transformation at your organization. It's a little too loose, a little too abstract, and it's going to get I think you'd get a skeptical response from your exec team. However, I think there is a lot of value in the framework if you're using it for something like a single business unit with a well-defined product and a common mission. This is something you can look at.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. I think if you're trying to expand your teams, expand your horizon, and get a lot done around a single product backlog, a single product, this is a good framework for that. But a lot of organizations or large enterprises out there have multiple products, so it kind of automatically crosses this framework off the list for those organizations. But it's helpful to rally the team around a single definition of done, having all your teams on a common sprint cadence, and doing things like planning and retrospectives together.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
So discipline agile delivery, or more commonly familiar to others as DAD, is a framework that was developed by Scott Ambler. He also has a pretty resource-rich website that goes through the framework in detail. And there's also a number of books written by Scott on the framework. It was originally developed at IBM Rational in about 2009 to 2012 kind of era. It's a collection of really best practices rather than a single cohesive suggestive framework. So it's nice in that way. The framework kind of defines a set of roles and defines 5 different delivery life cycles you can choose on based on the maturity of your organization. The first kind of being that basic lifestyle, or pure agile. It's really an adaptation of your typical Scrum. The second starts to get a little bit more advanced and start to really extend to lean principles, which is based on Kanban principles. The third is around continuous delivery, again, more on the maturing of your agile life cycle and starting to develop continuous delivery practices within Scrum. So teams that are constantly delivering with no set increments. The fourth is the continuous delivery and extending continuous integration to continuous delivery, and continuous delivery being based on Kanban. And then finally, kind of that exploratory phase and lean startup life cycle, which is based on lean startup with an emphasis on very fast learning, prototyping, experimentation, and driving learning within your organization. So Discipline Agile is really designed to let you pick and choose the best practices, things like extreme programming or test-driven development that makes sense for your context. So it's really, you have to really know your organization well and know what's going to work or not work for your teams. It provides guidance on how to plug them into the framework. The one advantage of DAD is its flexibility and your ability to adapt it and take it to make it your own. So however, this can make it a little bit more complex for those that get inundated when you have too many choices. In my experience, the framework is suitable for very large enterprises, but its configurability can make it difficult and slow sometimes to roll out across a large enterprise. Anything else to add, Chris?
I do. One of the things I do like about that is it does go into a little more detail on some of the best practices, like extreme programming or test-driven development. So it not only tells you how to organize, but it tells you a little bit more about how to do your work and some of the best practices for doing your work, which you don't really see in some of the other frameworks. Shall we move on to
let's move on.
SAFe? All right. So SAFe, as we saw at the beginning, is by far the most popular scaled Agile framework in the market today. The driving force behind SAFe, it really is Dean Leffingwell. He founded. The original version of the framework was released in 2011, so it's been, I guess, 8 years now since it was first in the market. And some of the foundational pieces of that framework have been around even longer. And Dean articulated it in some of his work in the requirement management space and some of the books he's written there. The framework, like the others, is freely available. You can see it at the Scaled Agile website, and each section has a link out to a set of different guidance articles. It's a really rich site with lots of great information. Of all the frameworks, the SAFe framework is by far the most prescriptive. There is some configurability to the framework, but it more or less has all the different configurations have all the same required elements and concepts that must be in place in order to use the framework effectively. Some of these examples include ideas like defining Agile release training, regular PI plannings, and the definition of some key roles like a release train engineer, a product owner, a Scrum master, all of these types of things. One of the things that SAFe does really well that I haven't really seen with the other frameworks is it gives you a lot of guidance around not only what the end state would look like, but how to get to that end state, and has quite a good defined adoption roadmap talking about how you start at the team level and then the steps to get scaled up across the organization. One of the advantages of being the most popular framework is that it also gives you access to the most resources, both in terms of written material and the availability of third-party consulting services that can come in and do training, teach courses, and help you right through your Agile transformation. And those are going to be available in any market. In North America or Europe or Asia or anywhere. Like the other frameworks, it does incorporate many of the same best practices. But one of the nice things about using a framework like SAFe is you kind of have a team of researchers constantly out there looking for new best practices, new ways to doing things. And it saves you the burden of really trying to have to keep up, and you can get a more distilled view of what's going on. As we've mentioned, it doesn't have the flexibility. So if the structure doesn't work for the context of your organization, it's going to be difficult to use. However, at the same time, that structured approach makes it probably the easiest and clearest to implement at scale. Anything to add, Ahmed?
Yeah, the other nice thing about SAFe is, when you go for the SAFe training, it's nice to get out of your confines of your organization and really go into an environment where you can have open, honest conversations with like-minded individuals across other industries and other companies that are going through the same problems that you are. and really try to learn from others as well as share. So having that kind of community approach with SAFe is something nice to have with it being so popular. It also has some nice underlying principles of SAFe that really resonate with me. Taking an economic view of your organizations and of your teams, really trying to unlock intrinsic motivations of your knowledge workers, and building incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. So it's all focused around aligning to stakeholder needs, managing cross-project dependencies, and really orchestrating your delivery amongst your large organization that can benefit from both Agile and Lean principles.
So now that we've reviewed the framework, let's talk about some of the ways which you can help you evaluate the frameworks. So the first one is do your research. And part of this, maybe if you're listening to today's webinar, that is some of your research. Most of the frameworks, as we mentioned, have a website, many of them with lots of information. Many offer workshops. Talk to your peers. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Take a class. So many of the frameworks will have classes that you can take to get an introduction or go into more details about how the framework will work, and you can get a better idea of how it will work for your organization. Another great thing to do is talk to your peers. Maybe there's another line of business at your organization that has started to adopt a framework you can learn from. Go to a meetup in your community with like-minded product managers or other peers where you can see what's worked for them and what hasn't. Another thing is to check out what third-party resources you have available to you. Doing an Agile transformation is a big shift at an organization. It's hard for people to do in addition to the regular day job. So bringing in outside consultants can really help. So seeing what those consultants are in your area should be another factor into choosing the framework you want to go with. And then finally, understand your own context, figure out, really evaluate where you are and where you want to get to, and make that determination if those frameworks are going to work well for your organization. And then, sometimes a hybrid approach is best. If you have things that are particularly unique or special about your industry or your business line, maybe take a bit of a hybrid approach to implementing your SAFe practice or your scaled Agile practices. That there? No? Okay. So let's see if there's any questions from today. The first question I see is, have you come across anyone using the Spotify model at scale? I haven't seen it at scale. I've worked at companies who've used it. But again, it's really meant for more of a single product. And it also requires a high degree of separation and independence among the different teams. In many ways, it's kind of what you try to avoid at scale, where you're looking for much higher levels of synchronization and cadence. So I haven't come across where it's worked at scale. Second question we have, would you recommend cherry picking from all of the different frameworks?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that approach. You normally want to pick a framework that really fits the context of your organization, or if you're doing a hybrid approach, mixing that in with kind of the characteristics of your organization to fit what's best. But really taking a little piece of all the different frameworks can get convoluted. So I'd be more inclined to take a look at a framework that really allows for more flexibility, like Discipline Agile, if you're going down that route. All right, that's it for the questions. Thanks for joining. So that concludes the second part of our series. You can join us for our final part, which will be next week, October the 30th, 2 p.m., where we'll cover cross-functional teams applying Agile both up and downstream. Please feel free to reach out to us. The email's there on the slide if you have any questions or comments, and we appreciate you for joining today. Thank you.